Welcome once again. We are officially recording, and thank you, Jenny, for putting that privacy statement in the chat box. If you haven't already, go ahead and start signing in with your organization and program name, the names of anyone in attendance. And if you want to share with us any silver linings to the lessons we've learned over the last few years, I'm not sure we're post-pandemic. I'm not sure I'd be the one to even call anything post-pandemic, but if you'd like to share any lessons learned, we'd love to hear from each of you. As folks are signing in, we do have one announcement and reminder about our annual meeting days together. So yesterday we kicked it off in the morning with an orientation for new program staff and anyone who wanted a bit of a refresher course on kind of the day-to-day and the overall operational part of the AmeriCorps program. And in the afternoon, we had two really amazing sessions, one from the Steve Fund, an external presenter on wellness and the emotional well-being of people, as well as BIPOC folks, and followed that up with an introduction to data equity from our own Lou Thompson. So yesterday's presenters, both the Steve Fund and the information that Lou used from We All Count, both of those are linked on your agenda if you want to learn more. I know that We All Count does some trainings, so there would be some more robust things that you could receive by checking them out, as well as check out the Steve Fund. They have a lot of great things that they're doing in communities, and you may find you want to directly contract with them to host some of your own trainings or interact with your members. This morning is your required update session, and then we will take a little bit of a break. Everyone will have a chance to be kind of independent, and then if you would love to join us again, we'd love to have you for a social lunch. We're calling it a social lunch. We're not together. We won't be serving lunch, but we would love it if you wanted to come back and do some networking with your peers at noon. Very important this afternoon are our two orientations for fiscal folks. And as you hear us say often, it is very important for both program staff and fiscal staff to have basic understanding. So we would love if both the program and fiscal side joined us this afternoon. These are basic orientations. However, the cost reimbursement session at 1 p.m. does have some upcoming changes. So even if you're used to that process, please join us, followed by the fixed amount session at 3 p.m. And do note that your organization is only in one financial relationship with us. They are either in a cost reimbursement relationship or a fixed amount relationship. So you only need to attend one unless you want to learn about the others. And if you're not quite sure, I bet if you chatted one of our co-hosts up, they could help tell you which relationship you have with us. And then we will end tomorrow morning at 8:30. We will open the lines, no presentation, just a general office hour or time to again come network with your peers, say hi to the staff. All of the staff will be there, and you can come and go as you please, and we will just have that line open for, I think, an hour and a half. We'll keep that link open. Thanks for signing in. I'm probably missing some really good answers to silver linings as well, but I hope other people are enjoying some of that. We would love to welcome back many of you. It's so exciting this year. Our portfolio of program remains fairly unchanged. And we are fortunate to welcome two new programs. Shout out to Civic Spark Washington, which is a replication model from California, which is now going to be operating and serving Washington communities. We love when organizations that are having success in other states are willing to bring their success to new areas for Washingtonians. Thank you so much, Civic Spark. And the Washington Association of Child Advocate Programs, which is shortened on your screen as WACAP. I just couldn't get it to fit, Brianna, apologies. They just completed a planning grant and are launching straight into an operational grant with capacity building as their primary focus. So welcome, WACAP. Also, a quick shout out to Tacoma Boat Builders, who has rehoused our Imagine Justice program, previously under Safe Streets in Tacoma. So also welcome back and to your new house. So thrilled to watch our service grow in this beautiful state. Thank you all. Before we get started today, we do have a few brief remarks. As I speak to you today, my home and my local footprint is on the ancestral and unceded lands of the seas of the Nisqually, Squaxin, Chehalis, and Cowlitz tribes. I pay my respect to their elders of the past, and those individuals here today are colleagues, neighbors, family, friends, and community. Land acknowledgements are something the Serve Washington team continues to assess, and you might find it changes as you interact with us or based on the type of events we hold. One of the reasons I like to do this for some of my sessions is simply the time to pause and create space to acknowledge that the world is bigger than me, it's bigger than the work that we are going to accomplish today together. And when the opportunity presents itself, how can we open our work to center all people who receive more disparities, and center this planet, our beautiful life force? Land acknowledgements are where I first learned there are 29 federally recognized tribes throughout present-day Washington, as well as 3 additional tribes who are not yet recognized by the U.S. federal government. They are the Duwamish, Wanapum, and Chinook. I find that learning opportunity has also become another why for me. And each of us has a long history that brought us to reside on the land and near these seas that we are now. And I encourage us to continue, in particular those who are not Indigenous, to seek to understand our place within that history. If you want to share where your footprint is located today, we would love that. I invite you to do so in the chat box. If you know the land that you're residing on, or you want to put any reflections, feel free to do so. We would love to learn from you as well and know what's important to you. The Native Land app is becoming widely popular, something that I use. It can easily be found in your app store. And I do understand that it's not always exact, but it is a good starting place. When I'm traveling, I love to open that up and figure out what's going on in the area that I'm at. In fact, when I do my land acknowledgements, I like to change up the picture. And recently this was taken at the Sandia Peak Aerial Tramway in the Cibola National Forest, where I and some of you were on Pueblos and Tiwa land in present-day New Mexico. The cactuses were in full bloom. Maybe they're in full bloom all year round. I'm not sure, but everything was looking so beautiful and so warm. And I definitely had to take pause and kind of reimagine this word forest and what it might mean to other communities. So thank you for the time to stop and pause and reflect. I'm going to put a citation, actually Jenny's going to put a citation, thank you Jenny, in the chat where you can learn more about various Indigenous cultures in Washington, and feel free to continue to share any of your thoughts in chat or later with us as the staff. We'd love to hear from you. Next up, we're going to welcome our Executive Director, Amber Martin-Yaw, for some updates. But before I turn it over to Amber, if you were with us in April on our April call, you started hearing about some of the fabulous and exciting staff changes that Serve Washington is embarking on. That piece Amber will continue to expand on. And I wanted to quickly let folks know that something has changed for me personally since that April update. I am not going to be a part of some of those Serve Washington changes, as you originally heard. I've made the decision to take some time for myself and reimagine what my next adventure might look like. So I will be helping with transition through the end of September. I have enjoyed my time immensely. You all bring so much joy to my day-to-day. And I'm actually really thrilled for you to hear about what are some new positions, some cool new people, and some brand new initiatives. So thank you, Amber, for your support and giving me this quick space to convey my update. Now let's hear about all the really exciting stuff. Amber?
Thanks, Robin. Thanks for making that announcement so people weren't trying to figure out what is Amber talking about and what exactly is going on. So I want to start. I know that that's kind of a big announcement to hear, and yeah, Diane, Robin will be missed, and we will talk more about how we can both celebrate and hopefully, well, not hopefully. Well, yeah, hopefully embarrass Robin a little closer to the end of her time with Serve Washington. She has been instrumental in so much of our work. But so have all of you. And so I really want to take a moment to just say thank you for everything that you all have done and are doing. You are running, building, designing programs, supporting members. By golly, you're trying to find your members because I know recruitment is hard. You're partnering with communities and you're just plain getting things done. And all of that is really important and hard work. But I hope you are also taking time to take care of yourself and your loved ones. It's been a tough year, and we cannot forget to take care of ourselves, especially if we're going to get all of those other things done. So just a quick reminder, I don't know if I'm talking to myself or if I'm talking to you, but I think it's important for all of us. I want to share, as Robin said, just a couple of updates, but that I think are really exciting. I hope you will too. Some of them are repeats of things you already know, but let me just run through a few because we do have new people on the call. So for Washington, we actually received funds, and all AmeriCorps members in Washington will have access to diagnostic and training that will support their self and career identity through BASTA. So BASTA offers a career diagnostic. Depending on where the members land, they'll also have the ability to connect with some learning about themselves to connect that career exploration, readiness, and service experience to transitioning out of service. There'll be more information coming out about this, both to the members and to you all, but we've also decided that programs that get all their members to participate in the BASTA diagnostic will be eligible for a $500 gift card. Members who participate will be put into a drawing for a gift card too of a lesser amount. So more to come, but really excited to have this information because it will tell us more about who our members are, why they've decided to serve, and how we can support them in their transition paths after service. Now, if your program supports members in the 18 to 25-year-old range, we also have resources to support up to 250 members in kind of a learn, earn, and apply model, partnering with SkillUp, where we would pay for members to have access to higher education or training courses to earn a credential or a micro-credential. And so there'll be more information coming out about that soon, where if your program has members within that demographic and you're interested in getting them access to this additional resource, we're going to be looking to you all to partner. That is, again, a pilot to really see how can we make an argument for greater investment at a local level into the opportunity path that our members have. The final thing that I don't think you've heard, well, not the final announcement, but the final kind of resource programmatic announcement is that we've also received a grant to support a BIPOC and small nonprofit equity fund. So this will allow Serve Washington to conduct a grant making process to support organizations to partner with your AmeriCorps programs. Essentially, we have a small pot of funding to support host site fees for BIPOC-led and small nonprofit organizations. The amount of that subsidized host site fee really varies on a series of factors about the organization that would be hosting the member. But we're really excited to do this, and this is building off of and hopefully providing some transition path for the organizations that were part of the COVID response corps and had some subsidized host site fees, but it also allows for a small amount of growth for organizations that weren't part of that COVID response corps to have these resources to help connect with more BIPOC-led and small nonprofit organizations and hosting AmeriCorps members. The other thing it allows us to do is create a BIPOC Leadership Institute or learning collaborative to support 3 to 5 BIPOC leaders in developing national service engagement strategies for their organizations. Because sometimes it's not just about how do we host a member, it's also about us learning how we change some of our processes to be more responsive to what those organizations need from us. And that's part of what that learning community will hopefully help us learn. So those are kind of programmatic announcements. And then we have big announcements that directly relate to well, that continue on the vein of what I think Robin kicked off. Amber has announcements within, by the way, I'm leaving, paraphrasing. Really, really excited. None of these hires are actually related to Robin's decision, but it's all happening at the same time. So, hey, if we're going to tear off the Band-Aid and go through a whole bunch of change management, let's just jump full in. So the first one is I am super excited to announce that we have hired a director of equity and grants, Micaiah Guy. So Micaiah is actually on this call. She has not yet started with us. She doesn't start until next week. But I met Micaiah through an interview process, and I was so inspired by her vision of social justice, of promoting equity, of what does this look like within a service community, and how do we talk to communities and center those voices in doing this work. She is a dedicated leader and change agent. Obviously a passion for policy, advocacy, improving community relations, and has more than 20 years of experience in both public and nonprofit sector work. She understands the importance of working collaboratively to direct the work of multidisciplinary stakeholders to implement evidence-based practices, advance policies, and create systems change. But when you actually have a chance to meet her and talk to her, I think what you're going to feel is the energy and the investment in how we can all do this work together. So I will share a full introduction of Micaiah to you with you all with the network, but I wanted to say we have a new position. We are doubling down on what does this look like for us to think through our grant making and our equity work. And I am excited to have Micaiah on board in a senior leadership position within Serve Washington. And so then tied with that, I suspect you are all wondering a little bit about what the heck is going on with the senior program officer position, because that has taken me a little time. And I'm excited to tell you that we have selected the senior program officer position, and that person is Jenny Benson from the Serve Washington team. While almost everyone in this meeting knows Jenny, let me tell you a little bit about why I think Jenny's the right person for the job. Jenny brings with her the perspective of being an AmeriCorps member, an AmeriCorps program staff person, and someone with a palpable passion for service. In addition to that, Jenny knows the ins and outs of what it means to help organizations develop AmeriCorps programs, work through challenges, because we all have challenges, and navigate staff transitions. Jenny's position as the senior program officer is not the same as the senior program officer position that Robin is doing right now. So all of us are going to learn together about what this new vision with these different positions actually look like. And I'm extremely appreciative of Jenny's interest and excitement to take this leap, knowing that we don't have all of the pieces figured out yet. I think Robin kicked us off with the less exciting news, which is Robin's leaving us to take some time for herself. And I mentioned in the beginning, Robin has been instrumental in so much of our work. Not just our work, though, instrumental in each of us as individuals and to the Serve Washington team. So more to come on how we will celebrate and probably embarrass Robin when it gets closer. But for now, please join me in welcoming Micaiah and Jenny. And I guess have a great day of learning. Connect with your peers. I hope you do attend the social lunch. I'm not able to, but I actually really miss these being in person and being able to meet so many of you. I know quite a few of you, but there are so many new names on this list. I hope I get a chance to meet you in person or virtually. And if at any point in time you want to connect with me about your vision for your program, I am happy to speak with you. My door is always open, and I will put my email in the chat box so you have it. Thank you and have a beautiful day.
Thank you so much, Amber. I should have had an applause track ready to go. I'm sure everyone is clapping. So excited. Welcome, Micaiah. Congratulations, Jenny. And yeah, I'm not really looking forward to some of those humbling things you spoke about, but moving forward, onward, and upward for all of us. All right, thanks for being here, Amber. It's going to be a long couple of days, and probably already has if folks were with us yesterday. Lots of virtual meetings. We totally get that fatigue that comes with that. I was a little fatigued myself last night, went to bed pretty early after a full day. Those of you willing, I would like to ask we do an icebreaker. Yesterday, when we kicked off our day, I gave people some time to not do an icebreaker. And so we said, well, let's do one tomorrow. So I know these things are kind of hit and miss. Some people dig them, some people don't. So if you are willing, we want to just do a short little icebreaker in the chat box. So get your fingers ready, get that chat box open. It'll be a quick one. What I'd like to do is I'd like to give everyone 2 options and simply have you type which option resonates with you. What's your preference? What's the first thing that comes to mind? So for example, if I say day or night, there you go. I picked day. We really want this to be something that goes fast, and we're just going to create a waterfall of responses in the chat box. So yes, there you go. Yes, you know what you're doing. Look at that. There we go. All right, so I'm going to open my list here. Okay, ready, set,
Jesus.
dog or cat? Concert or play? Sun or snow? Fries or tots? Tater tots. Fries or tater tots? LA or NYC? New York City, Los Angeles. LA or NYC? Train or plane? The Russell Wilson trade, yay or nay? The Russell Wilson trade, yay or nay? Hey, I knew I'd get something like Go Broncos in there. Teacups or the Matterhorn? Those are Disneyland rides. Teacups or the Matterhorn? You like to spin or you like to go on a coaster? And finally, Star Wars or Star Trek? Who are my Trekkies and who are my Star Warsians? Every once in a while I saw neither. Those last few were definitely for me. If you know me, those last few were definitely for my personal enjoyment. Thank you everybody so much for participating in that. Okay, let's begin. Let's dig into it. Let's get going with the learning for this morning. We're going to start with an important reminder. During the first year of the pandemic, well, at least I think it was the first year, it's all a blur, right? The federal agency was going through some branding and they decided to kind of push on that gas pedal and keep that going even with the pandemic. So there was a massive brand change while we were all experiencing a fairly large amount of change anyways. AmeriCorps is the operating name for the Corporation for National and Community Service, which is known as CNCS. So they're doing business as AmeriCorps, and you will frequently see AmeriCorps referenced in most of our materials, and I am doing my best to convert my language. However, you will also sometimes still see CNCS or the corporation because that is still the legal name and that is still what is in all the statutes and regulation, and it will take some time and an act of Congress to get all of that updated. So just please know that AmeriCorps, the federal agency, the corporation, and CNCS are all used interchangeably. This session is really about compliance. Like I said, not always fun, but really important so that impact can actually occur. And we want to be able to set folks up for success. So each year we talk about the new and different ways to ensure rules and regulations are followed, which ultimately leads and opens that pathway to community impact. So let's first talk about contracts. When are they coming? Why should I care about a formal contract? Well, grant making, which actually takes up 9 months of the year altogether. Now, you're not always participating for the full 9 months, but we at the commission honestly have some type of grant making process going on from the fall all the way through about this time of year. And then we get a couple months off as the years transition. Once those awards are officially announced about this time of year, there's a lot that goes into ensuring that we roll out those state contracts. The contract for you, the subgrant, is the accumulation of all of the work that you just did over the last 9 months with us. So I think it's important because I think it shows all of the work that you've done to date, but it also outlines how you can remain compliant and how you can continue to be a successful program. Now, that fully executed contract does sometimes go maybe to someone that's not you, or maybe someone that's not directly involved in the AmeriCorps program. So please be sure to know who in your agency actually gets that contract. Make sure you know if it goes into a filing cabinet or an e-file somewhere. You should be prioritizing trying to find that and to know what is in a fully executed contract. So you can see here on the slide, we did get the final kind of e-grants award for the competitive cost reimbursement pool. Okay, that's the only one that we have to date. So your contracts are in process. Any day now, we should be getting that final button pushed from the feds for the competitive fixed and both formulas. So we are still awaiting that final e-grants award. And as soon as we get that, we will let you know. That allows you to start all of your pre-enrollment and see the new year in your system, and state contracts will immediately follow. Now, when I say fully executed contract, this is what I mean, and it's a pretty big list. And a lot of it's legalese, but you've all come to be familiar. And we will also talk about some of these here today. So you're going to have your state contract, which is a few pages, followed by all of the terms and conditions that apply to your award, including the federal and the state. So we're passing money from the feds through the state, which creates a little bit of bureaucracy and means that everybody gets to put their preferences and their guidance on paper. So there's 3 different terms and conditions. 4 actually, excuse me, because we are under the state agency OFM. So 4 sets of terms and conditions. And finally, it also will include your grant application, that piece that you contributed to, your narrative, your performance measures, your budget. So if I was to prioritize anything, oh, it doesn't look like my action's working. Usually there's more bold. I would prioritize the AmeriCorps terms and conditions. It looks like it bolded the A, at least on my end. Maybe it's different on your end. The Serve Washington special terms and conditions, and your grant application. Believe it or not, if you weren't around or part of the grant application process, you might not actually know what was in that narrative and what your performance measures are. So we really like to remind folks that the grant application is the heart and soul of your program. If you're not familiar with it, we would love for you to read that thoroughly. I'm going to move past this pretty quickly. Once this gets uploaded to your subgrantee resources, it's really just a placeholder for you to come back and bookmark some of these things. So while you do get a fully executed contract via, I believe, DocuSign, so it comes electronically nowadays, there are places that you can find the pieces of that contract already posted and at your fingertips. And then there are some new additional resources. You may have found them. The AmeriCorps website went through a pretty big change during that branding, and they're still changing and still adding things. But there is actually a state subgrantee landing page and a managing your grant landing page, which were fairly new to me. Sometimes the federal website is a little difficult to navigate. So we do try to pull everything that we feel is important and put it on your Serve Washington subgrantee resource page. Okay, so let's dig in. We're going to start with the general terms and conditions, the federal AmeriCorps general terms and conditions. And just a reminder, as we go through, it was really important that you read these in full on your own. They are good about putting the quote unquote changes at the very beginning. So if you are familiar with these documents, you may only need to read the changes. If you're not familiar, begin to go through them and read, not for memorization, but to just get familiar with what are the sections, what are the kind of headers, so that you know, oh, I think I can go back and I can read that. If a question comes up, what document might that be in? And you might be able to reference if you just start to kind of understand what's in each document. They're large documents. There's a lot of legal language. You're not going to fully be able to memorize and interpret all of it, but it is important that you start to become familiar with it. Not a lot of changes this year. I actually don't think we're going to need all of our time together. So congratulations. We might have a shorter session than in years past. I did choose on this one in particular to highlight one change that I think has the most impact on the preparation and planning for program year 22. They removed the COVID FAQ link. So what does that mean? Well, they didn't actually tell us this, but we're going to have to interpret that this means you should be preparing for more of a traditional year. So some of those nuances that came under COVID do appear to be removed, and they may not be relying on those. So those special considerations, especially for COVID exits, when folks weren't able to accomplish all of their hours, be prepared for that to not be available in the next program year 2022. So you're closing out 21, that is still available based on your 21 terms and conditions. But as you think towards the future and as you begin educating your folks and your members, you're going to want to rely on a more traditional year. Now, do remember, medical issues in general, even before COVID became a thing, we do have the potential for early exits for personal and compelling reasons. I'm not going to go through all of that. Many of you know it. If you don't know it, you can talk to your program officer. But at any given time, if someone's exiting early, it's really important that you talk to your program officer, because there may be a compelling reason and there still may be some benefits that they can receive. Probably not the same types of benefits that folks were receiving under COVID, but this is still an option that we had even prior to the pandemic. Okay, let's go to the AmeriCorps specific terms and conditions. So this is for the state and national program that we call ASN. And again, usually there's so many more listed. It kind of freaked me out when I first saw it. You can read it on your own. You can see the changes that they've made on your own. But these are the ones that I thought were the most important. So if you are familiar with or have folks that participate in the U.S. Reserve Program and the National Guard, there is that 2-week requirement sometimes where folks may be serving with you, but they have to go off and do their 2-week duty. That has been updated to allow for more than 2 weeks. It is case by case, and you do need to have permission from us, your program officer, to do that. But they've changed the language so it's not a hard and fast 2 weeks. They've moved some of the evaluation language into the terms and conditions. This used to be in various other places. There's nothing really new about your evaluation requirements. They just moved the language into this document. And of course, as always, they updated the due dates. But please remember, the terms and conditions for AmeriCorps, you have to be a little bit cautious when you read them, because they are for both prime and subgrantees. And so the dates are actually in reference to when the commission has to turn things in. So we always have to make your deadline just a little bit sooner so that we can meet our federal. I'm going to stop and see. It feels like I have some direct messages coming in. Question, what about remote work? Okay, so that's probably relative to the COVID FAQs being removed. Teleservice is still and was pre-COVID an option within the terms and condition. It should be rare. It's obviously not going to look the same as it did under COVID, but that teleservice language does remain in the terms and conditions. Look it up. You have to have a policy and procedure. It should be rare. It should not be the basis for a program model, but there is some gray, and you can still find that teleservice language in the terms and conditions. Let me know if that didn't answer it, if I need to answer in a different way. Okay, I'm going to grab some water just a second. All right, now for the Serve Washington special terms and conditions. And so why do we do this? Why do we add more terms and conditions that you have to sort through? Well, we do this to clarify, right? We want to speak directly to you as the subgrantee, because some of the federal stuff speaks to multiple audiences. So this speaks directly to you as the Washington subgrantee. It highlights things that are important to us, things that we want to draw attention to. It outlines state-specific information. So again, if you're going to prioritize anything when you're going through the terms and conditions, this would be the first one. All four are important, but this is the one that you're really going to want to intimately know. We also have kind of a change section at the beginning to kind of help you know what's new and what's different, but I will go through a couple of those today. We added a section on staff timekeeping. So this is not a new requirement. Most of you will not have to change your practice unless for some reason you're not tracking your time. But the federal government still requires staff track their time. And it means more than just tracking your time as a whole. It means tracking your actual time that's demonstrated on the AmeriCorps grant versus the non-AmeriCorps grant. Now, we'd monitor for this. This rule has been around for a really, really long time. But as we bring on new programs, we felt it was important and we thought it was kind of missing. So we wanted to call that out and make that more specific in our terms and conditions. We did update our due dates. So again, in alignment with those federal due dates, we have to back things up a little bit. So the due dates that you want to look at and what you will be accountable for with your basic reporting requirements are in the Serve Washington terms and conditions. And that is something that we do every year that you might be used to. They're still around the same time. We just often have to adjust the day in case it lands on a weekend or something. And then probably the biggest and most exciting piece, I mean, as exciting as fiscal can be, applause to you, Thomas. Some of us find it exciting. Thomas reworked the reporting requirements for cost reimbursement grants. So those are the grants that are built off of line item budgets. Those are the grants that turn in a monthly periodic expense report that are drawing down funds based on actual expenditures. Thomas has been here for what, like a year, Thomas? And has found some ways in which he thinks he can reduce burden. Applause for that. So Thomas has reworked some things. The FFR is going to be removed. Now this is going to be for next year. So these are always the difficult times of year. When we end 21, you're still going to have to do your FFR for 21. But next year, months from now, like next April, next October, the FFR is not going to be required anymore. Thomas also changed the timing and the intention of the program income report. And you are going to learn a lot more today at 1 p.m. So that's just a brief highlight. Please come join us at 1 p.m. and listen to the awesome changes Thomas has made. Oh yeah, Thomas getting some props in the chat. So again, a short list, round of applause for short lists and reduced paperwork. Yaha. Because there wasn't a lot of changes, I would love to rely on some of you to help some of our newer folks. Tell us, what are some of the other important topics covered under the federal AmeriCorps terms and conditions. I think this is a real benefit for the group. Instead of me just saying, hey, please go read this, go do your homework, I would love for folks to help me out. What are some things that you use the AmeriCorps terms and conditions for? You could also cheat by Googling or using the link that went out in your introduction to this session. I'm a very patient person. I'm going to wait till some of you become vulnerable and allow yourselves to try in the chat. Prohibited activities, woohoo! Nuanced items like leave, suspension language, reporting requirements. There we go. You guys just needed time to think and type. Thanks for those of you that leaned in. We're gonna do a lot more leaning in here soon, but let me bring up what I came up with. So recruitment, selection, exits, a lot of things around member supervision, support, positions, release from service, living allowances, taxes, other types of benefits. These are all the federal terms and conditions that go into member management. Records and confidentiality rules. When you're going to make changes, what does that mean? What changes can you make? What changes require us to say yes or no? And as someone mentioned, those reporting requirements. Safety, criminal history check, of course. We always got to talk criminal history check. We're going to talk NSCHC later. Yeah, so there's some great topics. Thank you for those. Yes, look at that came in. I didn't see that one, criminal history, that came in as well. So yes, yes to all of you that participated in the chat. All right. What about the Serve Washington special terms and conditions? Those you might use a little more. I might see a little more waterfall. I'll give you some time to think and type. But what do you use the Washington special terms and conditions for? Yep, your actual reporting requirements and due dates. Yes, very important. So the AmeriCorps ones kind of talk generally, ours get really, really specific. What else might apply just to Washington? Branding, thank you, Elise. Yes, yes. AmeriCorps wants you to brand, of course. Washington wants you to brand Washington AmeriCorps, very important. Special event stuff, yes, things that apply just to Washington. Yep, project reporting, absolutely. Good, good thinking. So here's what I came up with. We do have some things that aren't necessarily found in other states. So we have some things that we talk to about staff and when you need to remind us about staff and changes in staff positions. We talk about the member placement form, which is kind of a nuanced Washington thing. We highlight some things that are also in the federal guidance, but we really drill down on some member service agreement and NSCHC things. Accessing your money. I'm surprised no one came up with that. It was probably too easy. But if you do not know how to access your grant funds, or if you're on the program side of the house and you're like, yeah, fiscal or do that, please take the time to read how you access grant funds and invoice. People mentioned all of the reporting and the differences that that looks like for Washington. There's some really important information on records retention that is a Washington law, not a federal law. And then, yeah, someone else also mentioned events and affiliation and branding. Nice job. All right, so let's talk about those deadlines. Let's talk about those reporting requirements. No changes. I'm as I said that, I'm like, oh, please make sure you're remembering that, right, Robin? I don't believe there's a ton of changes. I don't believe there's any changes, but let's go through them, especially for you folks that are entering into year one. So in Washington, and this could very well be different if you also operate under other state commissions, but in Washington, you must submit a template of your member service agreement to your program officer at least 10 working days prior to wanting to use it. Okay, we don't want you distributing it and having folks sign it and then us saying, oh, hey, on page 5, this could be interpreted differently. So get that member service agreement into your PO as soon as possible. There's no major required updates in the MSA, but you always want to make sure that you're updating, reconsidering your service dates, updating the value of the education award, which changes year to year, and updating the living allowance, which usually changes year to year as well. Also around that same time frame, kind of 10 working days prior to your first day of service, we want you to submit your service project special event request form. So all of these can be found in your handbook appendix online. And I think folks are used to this now. We've had this form, oh, maybe three years at this point. During the pandemic, it was definitely hard for folks to fill this out. But maybe as some of you do more and more in-person projects, we want you to identify 3 days that are important to you, 3 days that you will be highlighting the AmeriCorps brand, gathering as a group, whether it's a service project or a special event. One of those days needs to either be 9/11 or MLK. 9/11 is quite early in some of your years, so oftentimes a lot of programs will pick MLK Day. And then 2 days that are important to you: Veterans Day, College Signing Day, Earth Month, whatever aligns with your mission, vision, your community need. We want you to pick 3 days that you're going to gather and do something special. Your monthly invoice package is still going to be due on or before the 15th of the month for the previous month, right? So if you are an August 1 start date, your first invoice package will be due September 15th for August expenses. Your status reports are at 45-day and 90-day from your contract date. That is unchanged. That varies program to program. You all start at very different times of the year. So you kind of have to figure out, and your PO will definitely be tracking this. But at the 45-day mark and the 90-day mark, we need to hear about how things are launching and how things are going at the beginning of the year. And then we mentioned that you're going to select 3 special days, 3 service projects or special events. But once those actually occur throughout the year, you have 10 days after the date of occurrence to tell us about it. It's a small report. It's not a big lift. We use this for our social media. We use this for amplification and branding. We use this to highlight and tell Congress. A lot of good reasons for you to report back on those special days. Make sure you're taking good pictures, make sure you're wearing gear, all that stuff. And finally, your semi-annual reports, which is kind of a multi-package thing for both fiscal and program. Those are always due April and October. This year, April 14th and October 13th made the most sense on the calendar. Any questions on that before I move on? And again, you can read all about this in your Washington terms and conditions. Okay, the next slide is just a little bit of a reminder. The minimum living allowance this upcoming year for full-time folks is 16,502. It's always a little bit of an odd wonky number. That's the number. The maximum, and more of you are doing some great fund development work and trying to move the needle on paying a higher living allowance. The maximum is 33,004. Again, that is like a full-time 1,700 hour plus, 10 and a half or more months. I bring this up because we did add a little bit of new language in the handbook. If you're curious, check it out, page 30 through 31. Folks were always asking us about applicable and non-applicable taxes, so we made that more clear in our handbook, as well as folks have been asking us, what can I pay? What should I pay? What do other folks pay? That's a pretty complicated question. Has a lot to do on your own internal fund development and resources within your own organization. But we are seeing maybe a little bit of a movement towards trying to get close to that living wage by county. So again, you don't have to do this. You do need to be within the minimum and maximum. But since folks were asking, this is the link that we tend to use. And this is what some of our foundations that we've been working with that have been helping to supplement some of those costs. This is what has been most utilized to date. Has anybody been in Litmus lately? Litmus is like not the federal website, but it's a learning platform for AmeriCorps. It has some online courses and some learning pathways. Has anybody been in there lately? I know this is where you have to take your annual NSCHC course, but I'm just kind of curious if folks actually go and utilize this. Oh, good. Oh, wow. Recently too. Nice. Yeah, definitely for NSCHC. If you haven't been in there in a while, or you're just used to going there for your NSCHC, do take some time to check it out. I was pleasantly surprised at how much more is in there. So depending on how long you've been with the National Service family, there used to be something called the Knowledge Network. That went away, and they have started transitioning more and more of those pieces into Litmus. It feels like it's growing rapidly. I haven't taken all of the courses, so I can't vet and tell you how great they are, but I'm seeing courses in financial management. I'm seeing courses in, well, fraud, waste, and abuse, important, maybe not so fun, but there's a course on fraud, waste, and abuse. All of the performance management and evaluation courses have been moved over to there. So I don't know, it's looking pretty cool to me. It looks like they're actually putting some time and attention into it. And as far as like the learning pathways, you're probably used to that mildly annoying criminal history check session, but actually there's a ton more valuable criminal history check stuff. There's vendor updates on there now. There's, how to adjudicate and give you screen by screen. There's definitely some good stuff. Check it out. Tell me if I'm wrong, but check it out. So I think it is time for a break. So I am going to pause the recording, and I will put up, let's see, we started at 8:30. I'll put up a 10-minute timer. And so we'll see you back here around, 9:40, 9:41 before I can actually get that going. Thank you all. We'll be back in a bit. Yes, I was talking and my mic was off. Let me start over. Welcome back from your break. Thank you, Jenny. We are going to do a deep dive for the next few slides on criminal history and pre-enrollment/enrollment. And the reason we do this is, even if you think you know, it's really important that if you're seasoned in these areas that we don't get complacent. And it's really important that if you're new, you fully understand the importance of completing these systems accurately. So I'm going to ask for your help. So make sure you have that chat box back open and are ready to participate. And also a reminder that we do have checklists available for both of these systems. So we have a policy and procedure checklist so that you can ensure that your policy and procedure is really deep and in line, and anyone in your absence could pick up that system and be compliant. We have a documentation checklist for criminal history. You do everything in the system, including documentation and adjudication. I love a good safety net. It's a simple form. We think it's a good thing for you to continue to use and document outside of the vendor systems. And finally, we have a pre-enrollment and enrollment checklist that really walks you through some of the more difficult and gnarly steps. So thank you for the love on the forms in the chat box. Let's move on and ask for some participation. So we're going to start with the basic summary of criminal history checks. So May 1, if you've been around for a little bit, May 1 was a new rule that streamlined some of the more nuances in the past. And we would love to review just the basics of criminal history. What are the basic rules? So the first question is, can you tell me, who does NSCHC apply to? Meaning, who has to go through the process of having criminal history checks completed on themselves? There's two categories I'm looking for. Who has to do NSCHC? I knew this would be a little easier. Yeah, look at the chat box go. I can't even keep up. I'm seeing staff, I'm seeing members. Yep. I think y'all got it. So this is how they word it. All AmeriCorps members 18 and over. Okay, so 18 and over. And then staff, there's a little bit of a definition that goes along with staff. Staff that are paid directly by the grant through either federal or grantee share. So whether it's coming out of the federal portion or your match, those cost reimbursement grants, you have to run checks for your paid staff. So why is there a bit of a definition there? Well, not all federal grants, not all grants in general, allow for indirect or admin costs. Our grants do. So it's Section 3 for those of you that are familiar with a cost reimbursement grant. But if you are claiming indirect dollars that are going to support admins, usually your CEO, CFO, COO, all of those big wig titles, all of those VIP positions. We know y'all are really ones doing the work. But if you are taking some of those indirect funds and paying some of those other salaries outside of the AmeriCorps program, that would not be considered a direct personnel. Okay, nice work. Second question. When or by when must NSCHC be done? What's the timing of all of this? This used to be really nuanced, and now it's all the same for everybody under the new rule. Okay, we've got some answers. They vary a little bit, but for the most part, I think they are all correct. So before is the key, right? Some of you might have like a 10-day before policy. That's great, you know, give yourself a buffer. Some of you may just trying to be hit that first day before. I love the answer about like first day before for service on a member, but first day before you actually bill a grant staff. That's a great deep definition. One day before is the priority prior to start or service of work, service or work. Yeah, so final adjudication. Make sure that this is more than running the checks. Final adjudication, eligibility, complete documentation must all be done before work or service. And you got it, a minimum of 1 day before. And if we're keeping with the true value of this statute, we want to ensure that our folks are safe, and we want to ensure that we are running these checks in a well amount of time to actually make those eligibility determinations. So while they say 1 day before, most of the time we see checks run weeks, if not a month or two before. Great job in the chat. Next question, who is ineligible to work or serve on an AmeriCorps grant or in an AmeriCorps program? The hint here is there's actually 4. I bet you'll come up with at least 2, but there's actually 4. Who is ineligible based on their criminal history check process? Under 18 doesn't have to go through the process, but they're not ineligible. They can still serve. Who's actually, what results or what actions would make you ineligible? Like, I'm sorry, there we go. Now they're coming through. Yep. Yep. Ooh, somebody got all 4. Look at you, Sarita. Yes. Okay, so yes, we have some convictions that we need to talk about. And then there's just a couple that everyone tends to convict or forget because they don't really happen too often. But the first one is anyone who refuses to consent to the process. So if in your selection and interview, you say, okay, now I need you to go down to live scan, do your field print, we're doing this, blah, 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 sign here. And they're like, whoa, that's super personal information. I'm not sure I want to get into that. That's their choice. But unfortunately, if they refuse to even undergo the process, they cannot serve or work. Anyone who makes a false statement in connection to NSCHC. Now, this is a little gray, and you may want to talk to your program officer about this. So everyone who, you know, let me start over. There are times when we have seen someone claim no record, and maybe they thought their younger years were sealed, and sealing a record is actually pretty hard. I used to do that in a past life. And lots of times young adults think they have sealed records and maybe it didn't happen. Or someone forgets that, you know, 20 years ago, they had, I don't know, a pretty insignificant charge or something like that. So it's not necessarily for those types of situations. It is for when someone truly is trying to give you a false name or trying to mislead you. So that's a good thing to talk about with your PO if you come across an instance where you think someone has made a false statement. And then the 2 convictions for AmeriCorps purposes are anyone who's registered or required to be registered on a sex offender list and anyone convicted of murder. Okay, last question. How are you going to complete these checks? So what I mean is, what vendors are you going to use? And then bonus, if you know what components each of those vendors use. So there's 2 vendors, and those vendors are going to run a total of 4 different types of checks. Look at that. You all know your vendors. Yes, of course, field print and TrueScreen. Yep, look at that. a full answer right there. Field print, FBI, true screen, state of residence, service, and appeal. You even got the language right. Yeah, very nice, very nice. Yeah, so here is a link if you need more information on the vendors, but TrueScreen does that bundle, just as someone said in chat. It does all three. It does your sex offender check. It does your state of service check, which in this case is Washington. And if you are selecting someone to work or serve from out of state, it will do their state of residence check. And that is all kind of name-based. It's done through an application. It can be done at any given location. Field print, however, who's going to run your FBI check, you got to actually go to a kiosk and get your prints ran. And the turnaround time for both are usually, if everything is working correctly, usually 2 to 3 days. You can dispute that in the chat and talk some amongst yourself if you disagree. Okay, so I still want to continue hearing from you because you all do this, believe it or not. We know these processes, we've seen the screenshots, but we don't actually run these checks. So we would love to hear from you and have you kind of help in a peer learning format. What are some common pitfalls? What are some issues you see? Let's start with TrueScreen, who's doing your sex offender, state of service, and state of residence. What maybe mistakes have you made in the past? Feel free, I'm not going to come monitor your program just because I know you've made an error. What kinds of things would you want people to be cautioned when learning these? Yeah, so sometimes there's some false hits on same names, like names. If you have a somewhat dominant name, Tom Smith, it's probably going to give you a series of hits. And the vendors, luckily, check all of those hits for you, right? Back in the day when we were all doing this on our own, when we were all going to the sex offender registries, you'd get like 10-page printouts and you'd have to go through each one of them and say, not the person, not the right birth date, doesn't look like the person. So yeah, sometimes that happens. Oh, thank you. Using the wrong name. Check those spellings, check that legal name. Don't use a nickname. Very good one. Yeah, even members might mess up every once in a while. Walk them through these processes, ensure that they understand what they're filling out. Most likely they are at least more savvy than me and might be trying to do this on a phone. And so they might be clicking things and making mistakes. Yeah, knowing what's truly a middle name versus someone who might have 2 last names or 2 first names, which one's yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely some system bias when it comes to some non-dominant names. We all need to work through that, right? These systems aren't built for everyone, are they? Yeah, we have populations of folks that maybe have changed their name for various reasons. Mm-hmm. Those are good ones. Let me bring up what we've heard, and you can kind of let us know if you think they're right or wrong. So timeliness. There's nothing about the vendors that are going to help you initiate and adjudicate timely. That is all on you and the member to complete their pieces. So in order to be on time, in order to get everything done before the start of work or service, that is just something that you're going to really need to pay attention to. I think someone kind of mentioned some similar things like this, but when you're working through these systems, sometimes someone will go to the W's and they'll pick Wisconsin instead of Washington. So be aware of that. Make sure you're paying really close attention when you as the program are ordering what types of checks. You want to make sure that you're picking the NSOPW plus Washington in TrueScreen, and then if applicable, make sure you're using the right correct out of state. Someone else named this. Names, important, spelling, exactly on ID, legal names, absolutely. And adjudicating in the system. Not sure if that came up, it could have. But now each of our vendors do allow for adjudication, and the corporation, AmeriCorps, the federal agency, really is assisting upon adjudication in the system. We had a question about, is there an issue with hyphenated names? So I will say what my understanding is, and then I would love for folks that have more expertise in this area to help me out. First and foremost, I understand that sometimes people use hyphens, sometimes people don't. So we did have an instance where one of the systems was requiring a hyphen, even though the ID had a space, like the system wouldn't allow for the space to be put in. So you really do need to understand what the system allows. And if you have questions, utilize the customer service folks at TrueScreen and FieldPrint. I've also seen some people just run both. I know it's a little extra cost, but sometimes I will see people run various ways of organizing the name to ensure, especially if like on one document it has a hyphen and another document it has a space. If you want to come off your mics too and help me, anybody's willing, but it looks like, Laura, thank you. The latest TrueScreen update seemed to remove the box for adding the AKAs. I was instructed by TrueScreen to add aliases in the special instruction box until they add this feature back in. Okay, yeah, these are tech platforms. Sometimes things are going to change. Thank you for that latest update. Anything else from those of you out there that do this regularly? Any tips or tricks for TrueScreen? Well, thank you for that, Laura. Okay, let's talk. Oh, I had one more thing I had on animation on here. Everyone, if you don't know, there is a tool within your TrueScreen platforms that says CNCS monitoring report. It doesn't say AmeriCorps, it says CNCS, I think still. Run that report. It will give you a Excel spreadsheet, I believe, at least it does for me, and it will allow you to quickly see whether you've adjudicated, whether you've checked the ID. You want to look for holes in your spreadsheet. You want to look for empty boxes because everything should be filled out. That's how we monitor. We use the CNCS monitoring report. So it's a great way for you every once in a while after you've done a large batch, before orientation, run that report and double check yourself. Okay, another good tip. Give yourself and your members plenty of time. Yes, some checks are super quick and you'll get it in 1 or 2. And some take 3 times as long as you expected. Yeah, that's super helpful, Cheyenne. Thank you. I think sometimes, and correct me if I'm wrong, but because TrueScreen is doing a full package, right? They're running at least 2, the NSOPW and the Washington, but potentially 3. They won't give you results until they can do the whole package. So if a repository in Washington or an out-of-state repository is down, if when they're checking the territories and states for the sex offender, if one of those is not reporting, there's like an electronic bug to get that information. They have to wait until they can give you the results for the whole package. Yeah, that's another good point. If you do have multiple grants, I believe, yes, you have to enter some kind of identification to ensure that you're kind of correlating the right person to the right grant. Now, in Washington, and this might be different in other states, but let's say you accidentally did this wrong. You ran a Washington member under a different grant. Call us. Please let us know. Please let us help you. We may be able to work through that. We may be able to document that. We always want to help you get to yes when there's a mistake made before you have to burden yourself or disallow any hours or do any self-correction. Please let us know so we can see what options are on the table. Okay, what about field print? This is the one where it's live scan. So there's usually less issues. I still came up with a couple, but what are the hardships out there around field print and live scan sites for that FBI check? Yeah, sometimes the prints don't read right. So I have heard that sometimes folks have to go back, which again just eats away at time. So starting early. Yeah, travel for some. Washington is getting better. I would say that we are quote unquote better off than a lot of other states that I've heard of. In fact, thanks to a couple of you, we've opened kiosks on the peninsula. Michelle, I know you did one on the peninsula. I think Chelan Douglas, some prior staff at Chelan Douglas opened one in Wenatchee. But still, there is sometimes some travel, sometimes, and 50-mile away, or the site's not open. I just saw that. Yeah. COVID, right? COVID time. Sometimes the sites weren't open. Yeah, make sure you're giving members the correct program code. Yeah, you have to help them through that process. Yeah, sometimes it's just really pushing members to follow through. I totally get that. Here's what I came up with, and maybe it's not as bad as it used to be. But again, timeliness is all on you. No system is going to help you be on time. We talked about location and some of the downsides and some of the upsides to getting a kiosk in your area. And then the adjudication, at least some of you have told me that the adjudication is kind of bizarre. So just a reminder, because this has only happened, in the last like 6 months or so, there's two different sections that go into adjudication. There's something called my fitness determination. You got to go there first. You got to say, what did the field print people say? What is the field print determination? You have to go view that result. You can't make this decision on your own. You need to know what the system said. So when you go in, when you view my fitness determination, it will automatically chart or document or e-sign or something. It dates and I believe puts your name that you were in there. Okay, that is part of adjudication. Then once you know what the fitness determination was, then you can go into quote unquote my fingerprints and actually select pass or fail, which is the final step of eligibility. So you got to do both. Got to do both. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I want people to hear me. I think you got to do both. Oh, there's a good hit and tip for large programs. I'll let folks read that on their own. That's great. And again, similar to TrueScreen, FieldPrint now has a CNCS monitoring report tool, so you can double check yourself. Checks and balances are always a good thing. Hopefully not one person is doing this, but you have someone else ensuring that before members start service or before people start work, hopefully you have some type of checks and balance system, which usually means two people are putting their eyes on this. So this is kind of another summary of what we've already talked about. This is maybe kind of the negative lens, right? But we talk about this every year because it's important for both new folks and for seasoned folks to not be complacent, because if and when human error occurs, and that is always at play, we are all human. The federal agency to maybe not like to believe that we're human, but we're human. And the result, unfortunately, if done incorrectly, is usually a hefty disallowed cost. So we want to emphasize accuracy. We want to emphasize what is non-compliance. Non-compliance would be viewed as anything late. If you're letting someone start, you've started to pay their living allowance, you start letting them collect service hours, you haven't enrolled them in the system, you haven't done their criminal history checks, that the federal government's not going to pay for that part until they were actually an eligible and enrolled candidate. Forgetting different components. So failure to request the NSOPD, failure to request the right state of service, state of residence. We talked about this, misspelled names, names that don't match the identification. So when you get monitored or audited or the IG comes out, they're not only going to look for the check results and that you adjudicated the check, but they're going to say, okay, how did you know who that person was? They're going to want to see the ID or the review of the identification that you used to run the check. Staff get overlooked. We get really focused on our members, especially those of us that start cohorts at certain periods. You got, 30 people coming on, 50 people coming on. Some of you got hundreds of people coming on. And your AmeriCorps members are just boom, boom, boom. You never have any issue with your AmeriCorps member. And then you hire a new staff and you're just kind of like, oh, I forgot to run your criminal history checks. So don't forget about those staff that usually occur at different and various times. And then failure to adjudicate and document, even if you run the check. And I know this gets me too, because it doesn't align with a lot of common sense, but even if you run the check and there's no record and the person is eligible, if you haven't documented that and you haven't said this person is eligible, the federal government is going to consider that non-compliant. Okay, we're going to pivot to enrollment, which has another series of kind of interesting steps and a system that is not always our favorite system in the world, e-grants. Any final questions on criminal history checks? I will say you all do a wonderful job. Washington feels very, very lucky. We have very, very few cost disallowances, very few human errors. And so I applaud you and thank you for your continued accuracy and continued due diligence in this area.
Robin, this is Jenny. We did have a question come up in chat about checking ID in TrueScreen.
Oh, I must have missed that. Can you read it to me?
Yep. We used to check that we actually viewed /verified members' ID documents in one of the checks that seems to have disappeared. I believe it was TrueScreen since they recently updated their software. Is this correct that it's no longer required?
Oh, I see it now. My thing didn't automatically go down, so it's actually the newest chat. Yes, I'm going to have your PO check our most recent. We all got trained on this not too long ago, and I want your PO to double check me and get back to you. But I believe part of the new TrueScreen updates were that they were removing that box that you had to check to say I did the ID. Now, here's the thing. It doesn't remove that you have to do this. You still have to have an ID and a documentation and some kind of process, and you have to know that you're entering the right name. They just felt that it was duplicate for you to say, yes, I certified I did this. So you have to check it. You have to know you checked it. But I think that part became insignificant in the system. And so that may have disappeared. There's a recent training on some of the changes in TrueScreen, so your PO will review that and we'll be sure to send you that as well. But yes, no mistaking that sometimes when the system platforms change, it doesn't actually change the rule or the process or the fact that you're going to be responsible for that at a later date. There's an option to
Robin.
yeah, there's an option to check that you will review the ID later. That's interesting. Again, I think I need to do some review on this, but checking the ID later would not be in alignment with the process. You need to know before that name gets entered that that is the correct name. So I'm not sure why. Oh, when ordering the check. Okay, thank you, Diane. Yeah. You might start the ordering process and you might not have the ID yet. And so, yeah, there might be something that's just like, okay, yeah, I still have to do that. Okay, that makes sense. Phew, I was like, what? Why would you check the ID after you entered the name? Thank you all. Those are good updates. Okay, let's talk about enrollment. So I have a series of kind of please remember, but I'm very curious from you all. Again, unfortunately, we at the commission know the processes, but don't actually enact them. How long, for most of you, would you say it takes to actually get through all of the pre-enrollment? I know the final enrollment is pretty easy, but when you're in e-grants and you're doing all the pre-work and pre-enrollment stuff, how long do you think it really takes?
Robin, do you mean from start to finish, or do you mean like minutes at the computer working through the process?
No, yeah, thanks for clarifying. No, not minutes, like literally start to finish. You finally say, okay, hey, I want you to join my team. Do you want to join my team? Yeah, you want to join my team? Cool. We got to start this thing in eGrants. From the moment you like invite and select them all the way until like you're like, okay, I am done with pre-enrollment. I got all of the sections filled out. The member has all their portions. Depends on if additional citizenship verification is needed. That's true, right? Some people are going to get automatically verified very quickly, and some people are going to have to go through the manual verification process. And agreed, it is unfortunately a nightmare, another system that we continue to communicate that we believe there is bias in the system for non-dominant populations. Yeah, so maybe if you get an automatic verification, I'd be curious. Also depends on the member's responsiveness. Okay, maybe there's not an easy answer here. I was just thinking, I know recruitment's hard, and I'm wondering if any of you set a deadline where you're like, at this point, I don't have time as I approach orientation. Yeah, manual verification checks take a long time. At least a month. Thank you. Okay. Ideal situations, 2 weeks. That's fair. That's kind of what I've heard. I think that's important for new folks to know who are just going to be starting this process for the first time. And I think the first couple just are getting used to the system, but it can be really fast if the member's with you. Yeah, so maybe some smaller programs, or I'm going to venture to say smaller communities where maybe you're working on these things together. Yeah, so at least 2 weeks is what I'm seeing, possibly up to a month. Okay, yeah, agreed, 2 weeks. So the point being, if you're new or just starting this, please don't expect to have orientation on August 15th and start enrolling everybody on August 13th. Yeah, and then we have our really large statewide intermediaries that are, working on filling 500 positions. You just got to have capacity and staff time to do the portions for sure. So set a deadline for yourself. Know kind of what your, I don't know, drop dead date is not probably a good terminology. Know when kind of your comfort, your final selection is, in order to actually get everyone started on that day of orientation. So here are my points. And again, would love to hear in the chat box if you agree or have other points, but ensure that your pre-work on selection, eligibility, and criminal history check is done prior to starting the system. Give yourself and your applicants plenty of time to work through all the steps. Watch for that difference between auto verification and responding to manual verifications. So the system is supposed to tell you when you have a manual verification. You all tell me it doesn't work, or it goes to spam, or it doesn't come out. It's really important that you have someone that knows eGrants and is checking regularly on who has been auto verified and who is in a status of manual verification. Enter that criminal history check date field. Yes, you're adjudicating and completing checks with the vendors, but as part of eGrants enrollment, you're also having to add basically a certification that you've done it. And then once all the pre-work and pre-enrollment is done and orientation starts and people are in their positions, they actually showed up, that's when you can hit the final enrollment button, and you only have 8 days to do it, or 8 days that it will essentially let you backdate. You cannot forward date an enrollment. The trust will not dedicate an education award to a future person. So when you go to hit final enrollment, all of those things have to be done. All of the verifications have to be done. All of the pre-filled in sections have to be done, but you can't hit final enrollment until you see them and they show up. And then please use our pre-enrollment and enrollment checklist, especially when new. Got some good things happening in chat. I'll let folks read that. Jenny, anything that you'd like that we need to talk about out loud? Felt like there was a good waterfall going on there.
There was a good waterfall out there. I put a shameless plug in for Basecamp. Looks like Washington Service Corps has a really cool timeline that they work backwards. Graciously put in Basecamp for everybody if you wanted to see that.
Woohoo! Yeah, if we have time today, we can talk a little bit about Basecamp. Be happy to do that. And if we don't, definitely pop into office hours. I'll try to make time. Help me remember that. Okay, so I think we probably inadvertently already did all of this and had this conversation as we were talking earlier. So the common issues that we see are proking applicants. Y'all mentioned that. Programs forgetting to certify the NSCHC date field. So if you do everything right and the person shows up and then you go to hit enroll and it'll give you an error. It'll be like, you forgot this field. And unfortunately, if you forget field, sometimes that means that start date can't be complete. We already talked about watching auto verification versus manual. Please do not allow members to start or collect hours before all of that is complete. Run your rosters, know what your actual start dates are. That is the first time you can collect hours. eGrants is the primary source. And even though eGrants is the last step, eGrants is the system of record. Your MSA and your collection of hours has to agree with what is on that member roster. And yeah, don't forget to hit that final enrollment button. It happens. You've done everything right, which is a lot. You've paid a lot of due diligence. And then for whatever reason, orientation happens, you're trucking along, you're feeling good, you're doing good. And maybe you just forgot to enroll one of them. We've actually seen that occur. Please let us know if that happens. But don't forget to go back and hit that final enrollment button, since they won't let us actually do enrollment ahead of time. I think we're getting close to another break. A couple final announcements. As you saw in some of our recent communications, the Commission is purchasing MAP, known as the Member Assistance Program, for the entire portfolio of programs. So this includes 100% of your members and at least one of your staff. So we asked you how many of your staff you wanted covered. We didn't hear back from everyone, or we heard some people had EA plans already. we went ahead and if you told us how many staff, that's how many we covered. But just in case of an emergency and just for us to do our diligence, we actually enrolled 1 staff per program. So here's what the member assistance program looks like. This is really, really quick. You're actually going to get a welcome packet. And some of you may have already done this previously. Hopefully that means we get to, help you with your budget a little bit. Maybe you don't have to pay for it this year. You're going to get 24/7 toll-free telephonic access to mental health services. These are master's degree level counselors. There's apparently a very cool app with resources and the ability to schedule. There's text and chat and video, so it's super modern. And it includes, we did pay for the premium package, which would include 3 face-to-face counseling sessions if someone wanted that face-to-face time. I guess there's some other cool features like financial and legal consultation, life coaching, and if necessary, we all understand our world right now. Group counseling may need to be something you look at. It does require a bit of an extra program fee. I'm sad to report that we have had AmeriCorps members involved in or serving at schools and community centers where there has been active shooters. And so we do know that in other states, people have used this group counseling component. It's really important to highlight that even though it's an extra fee, we want you to know that's available. So yes, we are waiting on the welcome packet. As soon as we get that, we will send it out to you. And I just wanted to mention for those that were on some of the sessions yesterday, you heard Dr. David Rivera talk about 50%, at least this is what I heard, 50% of folks struggling with wellness already know this of themselves by age 14. I can agree with that. I suffer from a lot of anxiety. I totally knew that as a teenager. I knew I was different. 75% of people will have an experience or know this of themselves by age 24. So it takes a lot of us 10 years or more to actually seek help, to, go past the stigma, go past the discomfort. People live in silence and pain for a very long time before they actually seek help. So this is just one tool in your tool belt, but we really believe and want to honor that early help and early affirmation is very important. Oh, I got a little emotional on that one. Okay, so also member communication. In April, you heard that the commission is interested in increasing our direct communication to members in program year 22, those both in our portfolio, your programs, your members, but also those serving here in Vista and NCCC and national directs. Of course, you're going to remain the primary point of contact. We're not trying to overstep. Communication is always going to come from you, and we would always include you on any other types of communication we do. We're thinking bigger picture. We're thinking access to welcome packets. We're thinking the ability to send out governor communications. We're thinking when we have statewide events like launch. Those are the times where in the past, I think we've had to rely on you to pass it forward. And we're trying to prepare to be a little more proactive in that area. So the AmeriCorps team, in collaboration with Rachel, our comms person, is building a plan as we speak and continue to stay tuned for that. Big dates next year. In closing, we always highlight what are your big dates for the next year. Swearing in ceremony, again, is going to be virtual. We have made that decision. We're just not ready to move to in-person yet. That will be October 21st. Please mark your calendars. Make sure your members are aware. Your quarterly webinars, things like this, will be on the Thursday primarily this is the same schedule, just different days based on the calendar changes, but they're always Thursdays from 10 to 11:30, October 27th, January 26th, and April 27th. And for your subgrantee meeting next year, please hold July 12th through the 14th. And we would ask you to hold the full days. We might not take up all those days. We don't know yet if we're going to be virtual or in person, but it's better for you to hold more time just in case we need it or we need a little bit of flexibility. All right, so I want to put a poll up on your preferences around in-person and virtual. Let me see if I remember how to do polls. For years, we used WebEx, and so I'm just learning Zoom. And I know there's nuances and a lot of various answers. I'm going to ask for a little bit of grace. I'm really very just curious, in person or virtual. I know there's a lot more. If you want to give us more feedback on the nuances, we're always open to that. But really, we're just looking for, what do you prefer for next year's annual meeting, in person or virtual? And it should be available on your end. And I'll keep it anonymous. I won't share the results. Give it a few more seconds. It still looks like we have a handful of people to participate. Okay, I'm going to assume the last few are staff and probably not going to participate. So I'm going to take a quick snapshot of that. All right, thank you for that. I know, I agree with you, Lisa. There's so many pros and cons to both. And, and honestly, I'll go ahead and just tell y'all, it was 50-50, like exactly. So I think we're all struggling probably with the same desire to maintain a larger reach, but somehow be in person. Gosh, there's just so much to think through. So we do appreciate your feedback, and we will continue to struggle with that. And maybe someday our technology will be so good and our rooms will be so good that we'll be able to do some hybrid options. All right, so we are going to close the presentation portion. We will take our second break. Please don't go anywhere. We are coming back. We're going to move into a peer discussion. We have some folks ready to share a little bit. We'll throw it out to the group, see if y'all want to share. We will not be recording that part of the day. So I am going to sign off and say thank you for being here for the recorded portion. Let me get a chance to stop that. Thank you, everyone.